So tired. What should I do a podcast about? I feel like I just woke up from some well-rested sleep. Well-slept sleeping. Maybe I'll do a podcast about sleep because it's so important. Yes, that's what I'm doing. All right. I'm getting started here. Gonna get started recording. This is actually going to be a very scientific edition of Finding Your Identity because I looked up some science to back up all my talkings. But yeah, so I'm going to start recording the podcast now and stop jibber-jabbering. Welcome back to Finding Your Identity. This is episode 16, and I'm Derek McKinney, your host, and I'm going to get started after I get this yawn out of my system because I'm a little tired, and this episode is going to be about sleep, so my yawn is fitting, otherwise inexcusable, and it won't happen again. But sleep is very important. It is an important part of your daily routine. Everybody sleeps. Everybody has to sleep. There's really no choice. Otherwise, you'll die. So you have to embrace it. And you have to find a way to enjoy it too. Just because it's one of those things that, much like having to work or having to pay attention to your children, you got to do it. So you got to suck it up, buttercup. Figure out a way to pull through. Get those Z's in. So without further ado, let's get into this. And this is going to be a little bit longer episode, I think, because there's actually a lot of factors, a lot of facets, and just to kind of summarize what I want to cover, I'm going to cover essentially the basics and the anatomy of sleep to start, and then per one of my fans, well, I don't know if they're a fan yet, but they will be after I put out this episode, but I reached out on Twitter. Nope, not Twitter. I reached out on Reddit, and because the people on Twitter are kind of like lame, they don't respond to me. But the people on Reddit, now, I like them peoples. Those are good peoples. But I did reach out in the sleep Reddit, subreddit, to ask for, some thoughts about what I should do for this episode, and I had somebody respond, which was pretty cool. And I'll give him a shout out. He was RatsonU13. I think I'm saying that right, but I want to thank him for being the only person to respond. And he asked to learn more about getting into sports medicine. So I did some research there to find out what information I could about that I will pass along in this podcast. But I also get into some fun things about sleep, like lucid dreaming. So let's get right to it. Now, like I said, everybody needs to sleep. So I think it's very important to recognize that fact. And it's also been proven to cause health problems. It will increase the risk of certain kind of disorders like high blood pressure, cardiovascular disease, and diabetes and depression, and it's always been linked to weight gain as well. So I think it's pretty clear that it's something that you need to consider when you're considering your health. You got to consider sleep as being important, and it's directly linked to your brain functions, and there's obviously a lot of pieces in the brain that make sleep work the way that it does. And, so some of the hard scientific facts that I feel like it feels it's obligatory for me to mention. There's some pieces or structures within your brain that make sleep happen. So for the next 2 to 3 minutes, I'm going to talk about scientific-y stuff. If you don't want to hear that, you can skip forward. But hang on, because these are some big words that I may butcher and mispronounce. But the first thing is the hypothalamus. And it's this peanut-sized structure deep inside your brain, and it contains groups of nerve cells that act as control centers that will actually aid in sleep and arousal. So they are both, helping you fall asleep, helping you wake up. It's going to assist in that. And within that, this is a fun word, the suprachiasmatic nucleus, or SCN, I guess, is what the doctor people would call it. But those are clusters of thousands of cells that receive information about the light exposure directly from your eyes and control your behavioral rhythm. Now, I think the main thing that, all the science jargon kind of points out to me is that it takes a lot of pieces of your brain to make this work, which I think it's important to consider when you think of people who have brain disorders or who end up with brain damage for whatever reason, because they were hit in the head or had concussions or whatever it was. But I think it just kind of goes to show, and this is kind of a shout out to the use of helmets. It's important to protect your head. If you're riding a bicycle or you're riding skateboards or you're doing anything that's an activity that could potentially damage your brain, think very carefully about it and wear a helmet or wear whatever protective gear is available to you so that you don't injure your brain, because it can actually affect your sleep. And, as you kind of will find out or should know, if you don't, you might know, it is a very important part of life that, will cause your life to go out of balance. So the next piece here is your brain stem. It's the base of your brain, and it communicates with your hypothalamus, and it controls transitions between wake and sleep. And there's these sleep promoting cells in the hypothalamus and the brain stem that produce a chemical called GABA, not yo GABA GABA, but GABA. I think yo GABA GABA is like the anti of GABA, right? That group is just nuts. But the GABA will act to reduce the activity in the arousal centers, and essentially it's what starts to calm your brain down so that you can go to sleep. It stops stuff from working so that you can actually focus on sleeping, and more importantly, it will stop your body from acting out your dreams. So as you're sitting there and you're drifting off into dreamland and you think you're flying off a cliff or you're boxing with Mike Tyson, you won't punch your significant other while you're sleeping in bed next to them or hurt them, because you won't be trying to do whatever you're dreaming about. So that's important. Now, there's the thalamus, which acts as a relay for information from the senses to the cerebral cortex, which is a covering of the brain that interprets and processes information from short and long-term memory. During most stages of sleep, the thalamus becomes quiet. So it's sitting there just quietly waiting for its time to shine. And it lets you tune out the external world. Now, there's this fun thing, which there's even a band named after it, called REM, which is, rapid eye movement. But during REM, there's activity that actually like pops up in the thalamus. Now, if you've ever seen it on TV or heard about it, they actually will pay people to study them while they sleep, which I would always think would be super awkward, because you're sleeping in a room where you're hooked up to a bunch of neuron analyzers or something like that. You've got little sticky pads with wires attached all over your body so that they can monitor everything that's going on in your body while you are sleeping. And I think it's hard enough trying to get comfortable with the right amount of dent in the pillow and the right enough amount of blanket to leg out of the blanket ratio, and the right amount of temperature in the room. And so I'm thinking, man, like how is this even something that can make me comfortable enough to go to sleep, unless they just drug you up with some melatonin, which I'll talk about later. But maybe that's the case. They give you the melatonin and that's what helps you pass out, but you get paid to do this and they study you. So that's how they know, obviously, like the scientists have figured all this stuff out, and they've been able to name the different parts of the brain that are active on their scanners as they watch you sleep, and they know that you're going into REM because your eyes are going back and forth, in your brain or in your head while your eyes are closed. And then they know when different parts of your body relax, and they can, it's kind of fascinating how they figured all this stuff out. But what's interesting is that during REM and the thalamus wakes up, it's sending images, sounds, and other sensations that will fill your dreams. That's why they say sometimes that the external environment can actually affect the dreams that you're having, which is kind of crazy. And it can have an influence on what you might be dreaming about. So keep that in mind when you want to mess with your friends or roommates. Now, there's the pineal gland, which is located within the brain's two hemispheres, because there's only two hemispheres of the brain, left and right, which receive signals from those little receptors, centers. What were they called again? I gotta look back at my notes. The suprachiasmatic nucleus, the SCNs. So that signal will increase the production of the hormone called melatonin. So now that was, I mentioned, take some melatonin, because you can actually walk into a Walmart and you can go into the vitamin aisle and you can buy melatonin. I think it's the vitamin aisle. And you can buy melatonin, and it's kind of talked about as like a multivitamin type of vitamin, or a vitamin to enhance wellness. But what it'll actually do is it'll increase the amount of melatonin in your body so that it will help you fall asleep. Now, they say that you should take it at the same time every night so that it kind of builds into your body, like in a way that will make it a part of, so it kind of adapts to your circadian rhythm, which is another one of those big words. But that's your, like, I guess the biology behind it. There's a rhythm in your system and the circadian rhythm is this, thing which I can get into in a little bit more. But essentially, you're trying to keep everything in rhythm and in sync and balance there. So the melatonin works to kind of fulfill that. So they, I say they, and this is all the theys here are scientists. So the scientists, they believe that it's the peaks and valleys of melatonin over time that are important for matching the body's circadian rhythm to the external cycle of light and darkness. So this is hard if you are working a type of job that requires you to work at night and sleep during the day. So you might have to actually leverage melatonin where you're actually trying to, in some crazy way, adjust your circadian rhythm so that you can fall asleep at night, or fall asleep in the morning, or whenever you get home, 9-10 o'clock in the morning, fall asleep at that time and basically tell your body that this is when I need to go to sleep. It's also like, our bodies were basically designed to sleep when it's dark out at night and wake up when it's light out during the day. So because of that, it's important, for your own health to kind of follow that cycle. But unfortunately, it's not, and not everybody can do that. So I think there's mechanisms like this, or methods like this that, taking melatonin that can actually, get in there and help you work through this unfortunate problem of not being able to have a normal schedule. But I've been there and done that. It's tough. Hopefully, for whoever has to go through it, it's not permanent, but, it's something that you have to figure out how to adjust to. And melatonin can be, that over-the-counter solution. Now, I like this one, the basal forebrain, which is near the front and bottom of the brain. It helps promote sleepiness and wakefulness, which part of the midbrain acts as the arousal system. So it seems like, the neck bone, or no, what is it? The tailbone's connected to the butt bone, or the neck bone's connected to the shoulder bone. There's that thing. It's like all the things are connected. All the bones are connected to your body. I think you're starting to develop this pattern where you're kind of going from the outside of your brain into the middle of it and the inner workings, but how all this stuff is connected. Again, very important to keep your brain safe. But it's like all these different pieces of the brain kind of have some kind of impact on sleep. So it's good to know, like that, like taking melatonin is, there's a natural occurring chemical in your body. So you're taking melatonin to kind of enhance that. I've heard before that, was it omega-3, which I think you can get from fish oil, is the type of vitamin that you take to actually increase your brain activity to, it's supposed to help you think clearer. And, that's all stuff that you kind of have to understand how the brain works a little bit to really get the true benefit from it. So, another chemical that, another fancy word to know about is adenosine. Adenosine. And adenosine is what they call a byproduct of cellular energy consumption, and it's released from the cells in the forebrain, and it supports your sleep drive. So the interesting thing here to note is that when you ingest caffeine, it counteracts sleepiness by blocking the actions of adenosine. And I think it's important to recognize that when you're having coffee, or you're having tea, or you're having a soda, that you're ingesting the caffeine and you're thinking, oh yeah, this is like helping me feel more awake. Well, it's because it's actually having an effect on another chemical in your body, a naturally occurring chemical. So caffeine isn't naturally occurring, but you're ingesting it, and it's actually, suppressing another chemical that is naturally occurring, So, I mean, I'm definitely not one to talk because I drink way too much caffeinated beverages, but, it is something that should be looked at and evaluated occasionally to think, oh, am I ingesting too much caffeine? Because, what kind of effect is it having? I've had withdrawals from caffeine before when I have abruptly stopped or just didn't have it for a few days, and I get headaches and I start to feel moody, and it's kind of crazy what kind of power that the caffeine is actually having over me. But that's just kind of you're taking the good with the bad there, and you're making a decision to take it because you're thinking, well, I think the effects it's having on me to help me get through my morning is, outweighing what it might be doing. But it's not to say that it's like really bad. I think you just need to do it in moderation. Now, the last little scientific word that I want to put out there is the amygdala. I've always loved that word, the amygdala. I feel like that should be an energy drink or something like that. Amygdala 4000. But it actually wouldn't be an energy drink. The trick would be on you because it would put you to sleep. Anyway, so the amygdala, it's an almond-shaped structure involved in processing emotions, becomes increasingly active during REM sleep. So I think this is what actually draws out and helps with dreaming. So it actually would be a terrible energy drink name now that I think about it, because it really doesn't have anything to do with energy. But it could be a drink that helps you lucid dream or have beautiful daydreams. But we'll talk about lucid dreams later. So that is the basic anatomy that I think I went into and went way over. So you probably skipped ahead and you're like, I skipped ahead 5 minutes because Derek told me to skip ahead 5 minutes and he's still talking about scientific stuff. What the heck, man? But, well, here we are. So now, 20 minutes into the podcast, let's talk about the sleep stages. Now, that's going to just be the next fun part because sleep stages. So there's REM, which I talked about, which is the rapid eye movement stage, and then there's non-REM. Now, those are types. So those are sleep types. I get them confused. All this sleep terminology that I just was doing research on while I was not sleeping last night. But the types of sleep, the rapid eye movement and the non-REM are key to sleep. Non-REM sleep actually has the stages. It actually has 3 stages, and each stage progressively gets a little bit more into the deeper sleep, if you will. And the first stage of non-REM is that changeover from wakefulness to sleep, and it'll last several minutes. And during that time, your heartbeat, breathing, eye movement, and muscles will relax and slow. So all those parts of your body will slow down and relax, and your brain waves will slow down. And then you'll get into the second stage, which will slow your breathing and relax your muscles even further. And this one, your body temperature will actually start to drop and your eye movements will stop. And the brain activity will slow down, and you'll see maybe some bursts of electrical activity, but it'll be slower. And you'll actually spend more time in this part of the sleep cycle than any of the other stages, because throughout the night you're constantly going in and out of these stages. You're going through these stages of non-REM and then going into REM and then out of it. And so this is something that's occurring throughout the night while you're sleeping, which is part of the reason why you need the minimum, which they say is 7 to 8 hours, because you need that full cycle for your body to go through the cycle of all these stages in order to truly do what it needs to do. Now, I'll kind of get into what that means a little bit more in a second. But REM, I think, is what might be called the fun stage, because that's where you dream. And, they say that it's going to occur within the first 90 minutes after falling asleep. It's rapid eye movement, so your eyes are moving rapidly back and forth, side to side, within your closed eyelids. And there's going to be a mixed frequency of brain activity that is going on while you're in the rapid eye movement. And your breathing will become faster and irregular. Your heart rate and blood pressure will increase to what would seem like you're awake, those kind of levels. And this is where your dreaming occurs, like I mentioned. And you can dream in non-REM sleep too. So it's not that you only dream in REM. your arm and leg muscles become temporarily paralyzed, which is kind of freaky, but that's what prevents you from acting out your dreams, like I mentioned before. And that was the, snigganiggalumamug, or whatever. Whatever that was that I said, yeah. If I look back and see, that was the brainstem. Yes. And the GABA, yeah, all that fun stuff. Prevent you from getting up and walking and getting in your car and pretending you're driving in the race car in the Indianapolis 500, but crashing your car through your garage and over an embankment into a pond, which would be bad. So, as you get older, and this is always interesting to me because I can remember how I had teenage years and I just loved sleep and I just couldn't get enough of it. It was so great. I used to look forward to being able to sleep in. It was great. But, then you start working and you get weird shifts. Like I had started working, I think I was early morning shifts when I started, but then there's times when I was working night shifts or really, really long shifts from morning till night. And then there was times when I was working the late shifts and closing, so that it meant that I wasn't getting home until the wee hours of the early morning, especially because I'd get out of work and not go straight to bed and probably go hang out with people, go to a diner that was open 24 hours, and then go home and roll in about 5 o'clock in the morning, 6 o'clock in the morning, and then sometimes not even fall asleep then. Sometimes just watch something, cartoons, whatever, just to kind of calm down a little bit. But then I'd fall asleep, and then I'd be sleeping until 1, 2 in the afternoon. And those were rough shifts. And that's, again, where I wasn't using melatonin, which is probably why I was so all over the place. Because I wasn't doing that constantly and nonstop. So that wasn't something that I could plan around, couldn't build my circadian rhythm around, unfortunately. And I think, people experience that. I think when you're in college, you're at the mercy of the assignments and tests and studying. So that can also be something that you can't plan your circadian rhythm. Not like you can actually control it, but it's hard to actually, not have a regular schedule and, practice really good sleep wellness habits is what I'm getting at. But as you get older, you actually, will sleep less of your time in REM sleep. So that's kind of interesting, which I wonder if that means when you're like 80, you just don't dream anymore. That's sad. But I guess you enjoy your days a lot more because you hopefully are retired and not working, and then maybe you just sleep whenever you want. Now, another important part of sleep is when the memories are formed, short-term and long-term memories. I think this isn't in any of the research I found, but I remember hearing that your short-term memories are converted to long-term memories when you're in the middle of one of these stages. And I think it's REM is basically that stage when it's consolidating it. I mean, I did see that. It seems like maybe they just don't know for sure, but it seems like it's during the whole sleep cycle that those memories are being converted and broken down to long-term memory. So if you consider that, if you didn't sleep, if you had a crazy night and people don't remember those crazy nights, it might be because you didn't sleep, but you didn't allow your brain to actually consolidate it down and turn it into long-term memories, which, sometimes the partying gets a little crazy. So maybe that's a good thing. Maybe you're fortunate for it not being something you will remember long-term. Now, there's mechanisms, as they call them, sleep mechanisms. They're internal biological mechanisms. The circadian rhythm, which I mentioned, and homeostasis, which is another fun word to say. Although circadian rhythm, I always think of cicadas, and I don't know why. And I always just think of the cicadas, when they were buzzing in all the trees and how there was hundreds of them, because I think they only come around every 7 years or 8 years or something like that. And it's insane because you feel like it's an invasion of an alien insect. But when the cicadas are all buzzing at the same time and it's like that rhythm, I always thought that's what circadian rhythm was. But then I got older and I got a little bit smarter, and I found out that circadian rhythm is something different. That it's, as it's described, it's direct. They direct, or it. Jeez, I think I'm tired. What do you know? Circadian rhythms direct a wide variety of functions, from daily fluctuations in wakefulness to body temperature, metabolism, and the release of hormones. They control the timing of sleep and cause you to be sleepy at night, and give you that tendency to wake up without an alarm clock. And it's something that's going 24 hours a day. It's always running. It's the biological clock, which is funny because they always talk about biological clock, and it's like something that has to do with the woman's biological clock and when she can have babies. But everyone has a biological clock, and it's running, and circadian rhythm is one of the features of that. And it's also important for synchronizing with the environment, like daytime and nighttime. So treat your circadian rhythm with respect, man. Now, the sleep-wake homeostasis, it keeps track of your need for sleep. So that's what's actually that internal clock that makes you feel tired, makes you feel like you need to sleep. Basically will take you to the point of exhaustion and make you feel that exhaustion and slap you in the face with that exhaustion so that you feel, I think I need to go to sleep, or I'm going to get beat up some more by my homeostasis. My homeostasis. He's going to beat me up. He's going to make me sleep. But it's funny because this article does talk about how, and I should probably have said this at the beginning. I'll wait to the end to see where this source was. It's the NIH, National Institute of Health. But, it does actually, and to quote it, night shift workers often have trouble falling asleep when they go to bed, and also have trouble staying awake at work because their natural circadian rhythm and sleep-wake cycle is disrupted. In the case of jet lag, circadian rhythms become out of sync with the time of day when people fly to different time zones, creating a mismatch between their internal clock and actual clock. So another example, the jet lag. And, it's always funny to me because it seems to be only one direction. It doesn't seem like you get it, but I guess that kind of makes sense. You're only going away for a week, but you get the jet lag when you get somewhere, and it's like, what the heck, man? This is when I don't want to have the jet lag because I'm on vacation and I want to enjoy my vacation, and you're messing me up. Homeostasis, yo. So, anyways, as I often sidetrack myself, I think, the next big question is around how much sleep do I need? And I think that's important to know, so I'm going to tell you. So I said 7 to 8 hours before, and that's the number that is suggested for how much sleep you get. It's, it's always recommended that you get the 8 hours, which they've been saying, and now I think it's shifted to the 7 to 8 hours, but generally I think it's important to get that sleep. Now, babies need way more. They need, like 18 hours of sleep. And children that are in school that, are kindergarten through, I want to say 8th grade, because I think high school, which generally where I'm from, high school starts in 9th grade. I think high school creates a different problem for sleep. But, they need about nine and a half hours of sleep. And I think there's been a lot of arguments to say that they should start high school later, because it was always that the high school kids, I mean, it's still how it is, at least right now in 2019, August 2019, the school year is about to start in a couple weeks for the 2019 fall semesters. But they've always had a high school start. I remember I had to catch the bus at like 6:45, which meant, because I had to look nice, I had to look dressed to the nines for whatever, impressing my teachers? No, impressing the other kids. Because of that, it was always had to get up at, like 5:30, 6 o'clock, at least in the start of the school year. It always kind of tapered off up until about the Christmas holidays, the Thanksgiving, Christmas holidays always kind of marked when I just didn't care as much. But then was reset in January. It was like the new year. I got to look fresh again. But, it was always kind of tough getting up so early because it really meant you had to go to bed early. And who wants to go to bed early when you're a kid? So like that's always, I think, a difficult balance there is trying to, especially if you have homework, as you get into the higher grades and you've got the homework or you really end up staying up kind of late, I think that's problematic. And there's been talk of reversing the schedules because the high school kids that start at 6:4 have to catch a bus at 6:45 or yeah, I think they start at 7 or 7:30, I forget. But, whereas you've got your kindergarteners to third graders or fourth graders or whatever, who their bus isn't coming until like almost 9 o'clock, So if they reversed it, it would make a lot more sense for the high school kids who actually need more sleep. Because when you're younger, it seems that you can go to sleep at 9, 10 o'clock at night and be up at 6 and be fine. Although it's generally a good idea to try to get your kids to bed as soon as possible, like before 8 o'clock. And that's just so you can have a break. But, you and your partner really trying to get the kids asleep for your wife, in all honesty. But, having them get to sleep on time is really just, it's helping them, and they don't often see that, and they always keep pushing to stay up later and, finish another episode of whatever, or watch the whole, movie that's still got another hour in it, because they want to, they want to experience the stuff that they feel like is a mystery past their bedtime. Bedtimes are always, it's a restriction on them being free. So they end up having to, make that adjustment, but it's good for them. They need to understand that at some point that it's good for them. But they really should be adjusting the schedule so that the high school kids actually go in more towards the 9 o'clock hour. And then the, little kids, the preschoolers, the kindergarteners or whatever, can be the ones that have to get on the bus and get up earlier. And, that would actually put them home sooner too, which might be good. But anyways, I digress, and I'll get off my stump right there. Now, the note that I wanted to, to make about the dreaming, like just kind of briefly, I guess, everybody dreams, because I'm going to talk about the lucid dreaming, so I don't want to get too deep into this, but, it's estimated that you spend about 2 hours dreaming at night, but most people don't remember their dreams. It's kind of funny because scientists don't really know why people dream or what is the purpose of dreaming. And I don't know, to me it almost seems counterintuitive, because if your body was really built so that it would relax to revitalize your nerves and whatnot, and to rebuild and regenerate cells, and to basically overall help your health, then to me dreaming seems kind of ridiculous, because there's nightmares or night terrors. There's dreams where you're super excited because it was a really good dream, which to me feels like it would create stress or anxiety, or potentially it would create excitement, but it would do things to your body that would, seem to me that it would hurt your body more, while you're sleeping. But I'm not a scientist, so I'm not going to say I can even substantiate any of those arguments, but to me it seems like you wouldn't want to dream, but there may be some other reason behind it that, it could be, that it's needed because it needs, like, it might be just your body's going through so much that this is a way to kind of help you get through it, like like help your body actually find a benefit to it. Maybe it was just like a what do they call it? Evolutionary trait that developed because people wouldn't sleep unless they felt like they were getting something out of it. And since humans have this innate desire to be entertained, maybe that was part of it, so we evolved to dream. I don't know, that's my thought. It's kind of funny, just a side note that they say, some people dream in color while others recall them in black and white. And that just seems kind of funny to me, because I have to wonder, if that only became apparent in the 50s, because if you think of dreaming as like you're watching a show, or whenever I say the 50s, but I guess I put that point in time as when color TV or color programs started to become popular. But was it like before then everyone dreamt in black and white because that's how they pictured it, and they would always remember it as how they would be seeing a TV? And then the 50s come along, or whatever that date was, and you start getting color television, and now it's like, oh, I think I dream in color sometimes. Because if you really think about it, like everything that's being said, like, has to be told to scientists by how people are experiencing it. They don't have an actual way to see your dreams with a machine. So everything that they're basing their research off of is, told verbally. And of course it's told verbally by enough people to make it seem substantial, but there's no way to truly verify that people can actually dream in color or black and white. They're getting polled after they wake up, and they've spotted that they had a dream, or they're just polling people who dream and think, oh, did you see it in color or black and white? It could be in just red, green, or blue type of, that RGB format or whatever. Maybe it's yellow hued, or it's got filters, but what do we know what color is if we can't even really remember dreams? So that always kind of strikes me as kind of funny. But I think, like, one of the this article, like I said, it came from the National Institute of Health, and it was actually a subsection of the National Institute for Neurological Disorders and Strokes that did this article about understanding sleep and your brain basics. But another source that I found, and this came from the University of Rochester, providing evidence of why your brain cells need sleep. And this is the key kernel to take away, because this is why it's important. But the study found that while you sleep, your brain removes toxic proteins from its neurons that are a byproduct of neural activity. So all day you're spent thinking and thinking and thinking and dreaming up schemes about your side hustles or whatever. And there's like a plaque or a toxin or whatever you want to call it being distributed across your neurons. And when you sleep, they've been able to show that it's actually helping to your body, or your brain is removing that buildup and those toxins. So the important note here is when you don't get enough sleep, the toxic proteins, they remain on your brain cells, and they can wreak havoc by impairing your ability to think. And, something that you really have to consider is damaging. It's ultimately, very damaging. So something to ponder there when it comes to that. Now, of course, I think helping anybody who's listening to this podcast would be to give some tips. So the NIH gives some tips on getting a good night's sleep. And, the recommendations are often set a schedule. So, trying to fall asleep at the same time every night or trying to go to bed at the same time every night is good. They say, you should exercise 20 to 30 minutes a day, but, you shouldn't do it right before bed. So you should allow a few hours before going to bed after exercising. You should also try to avoid caffeine or nicotine before going to sleep, or even alcohol, because anything that's going to kind of stimulate your brain activity or your body isn't going to be helpful when you're trying to fall asleep. You should try to relax in bed. I often like to read while I'm in bed, and I often hate that because I really want to be able to read more than I usually do right before bed, which is why I take other times during the day to read. But, reading right before bed will put me out usually like within 20 minutes. Sometimes if it's a really good book, I can actually last about an hour like reading, but most of the time it's, 20 minutes to a half an hour and I'm just zonking out, or I'm starting to reread the same sentence over and over. So reading is often good. Sometimes I like to read the nonfiction at night too, because that's that stuff's a little bit drier than the fiction, which is a little more exciting. Now, there's been some things that have said that you should have a completely dark room. There's other things that say that you should, have natural light coming in. So, basically no shades or minimal blockage of windows so that you can wake up. My wife has been saying this several times that we should make it so that our room has light, but I don't like people looking in, or I don't like the idea of the people looking in my windows. So I'm always like, close the shades, close the curtains. Even though it's not very likely that they're looking in my windows, but you never know. So I like to, have the shade and the curtain closed, but they say, and that's what she was saying, that you should have natural light waking you up in the morning. And sometimes it just happens because no curtain, unless you've got specially designed windows, can truly block out every bit of light, especially when the sun happens to, for most of the year, it feels like, shine on the two windows behind my head in my bedroom. But so often I'm getting little cracks of light on my eyes anyways, but maybe that's a good thing because I still got to get up. I mean, I can't fight it. Can't fight the sunlight, just like you can't fight the moonlight. It also, the other tips is that you shouldn't just lie in bed awake. And if you can't fall asleep, you should get up and do something like reading to try to get yourself into a state of calmness so that you can fall asleep, to try to get yourself tired. You can do the melatonin trick. Sometimes I'll take that 5 milligrams of melatonin before bed. Sometimes I'll take it, an hour before bed to just kind of help me get relaxed, and I think it really works. I often take it not so much to fall asleep, but to try to help it keep me asleep, because I sometimes think I wake up for no reason, which could be a problem, but it is what it is. I often don't go to bed early enough, and then I still have to get up at the same time every morning to get to work. So that's what I have to deal with. Now, I think, kind of speaking of that, it's imperative, I think, to get enough sleep if you're doing the kind of job like where you're working in an office or behind a desk, where you're not doing anything physical, where you're not, working construction or roofing. Although it would be really bad if you fell asleep while you're roofing, because I'm pretty sure you would fall off the roof, which is a good thing for the harnesses, because then you could just be dangling and taking a nice nap. Which reminds me of the thing that I saw with somebody who was climbing El Capitan, the highest cliff face, I think, in the United States. That's in Yosemite, I believe, where sometimes people will climb it and they'll actually camp on the side of it, on the face of it, because they can't climb the thing in one day. And so they have these tents that are basically suspended from the wall, which is just blows my mind to think how, like, I don't know, maybe that's the most peaceful thing on earth there. Maybe that's like the best sleep you could ever get, as long as you don't feel like there's a chance that you'll fall to your death. But that could just be an insane way to sleep. But as I get sidetracked there, I think as long as you're doing, like, which I think a lot of people do for work, the kind of work that isn't super physical, then it's even more important to get to sleep, because it's going to be hard to stay awake, and you're going to look like a fool taking a nap at your desk. Trust me. I had to quit a job one time because I couldn't stay awake, but it was when I was a lot younger and I was kind of immature about my jobs. This is before I went back to college. It was like I was in the restaurant business and decided I wanted to try to go into an office environment, but I had to be up at 7:30. I had to be to work at 7:30 in the morning, but I lived in a house that was like basically almost a frat house where the guys there would not go to sleep until 2-3 o'clock in the morning. So that was just a disaster when I just wouldn't be able to get to sleep until 1-2 o'clock in the morning, and then still have to get up and get to work by 7:30. So I did the stupid thing, and I went back to the restaurant business where I had a job that allowed me to stay up late. So anyways, I learned my lesson, and I finally figured out the right path there. But I think it's important. Getting your sleep is important, bottom line. Now, I found an article on ladders, which, if you don't know, ladders.com is a website for helping you find jobs. And they published this article about, about sleep and how sleep deprivation can actually be hurting your career. And, I think the main thing that you got to kind of look at is you want to be able to perform. You want your mind to be able to perform in your tip-top shape and be very functional, because that's kind of the critical thing to your job. You're doing the mind work, right? So, maybe you're doing mind-numbing stuff like data entry, which doesn't require a ton of thinking. You're just doing repetitive things, but still you don't want to screw that up. So you need your sleep. And, we know that sleep is good. And, it's known, and like, as much as I've been kind of going on and on, it's known that it's needed for full brain activity. Now, I'd say the reason why I kind of turned to this article, because I like what they kind of provide as some tips in terms of what you should do to get high quality sleep at night, because it's not just so much about getting the sleep, it's getting high quality sleep, and that means you need to be able to fall asleep and then stay asleep and have it be restful. So they suggest to stay away from sleeping pills, which I think makes a lot of sense, because that's just a chemical that is going to be altering your brain chemicals that are naturally existing, like I mentioned before. It's like caffeine, staying away from caffeine, but I think sleeping pills have a more dramatic effect. I think melatonin is probably the most that I would ingest in terms of trying to help myself get to sleep. Now, I've heard a lot of people, I've worked with people who say they don't drink caffeine in the afternoon after lunchtime. That could be effective. This says to stop drinking caffeine, which a lot of times is hard. But if you try to stop it after a certain time, I always try to make it a rule that I don't drink caffeine after 8 p.m. and I try to get to bed by 10, but I don't know if 2 hours is a good enough window. But I generally try to follow that to some degree, but be consistent with it. I only ingest that caffeine in the mornings. So hopefully that's helping. Now, another one that's becoming way more prevalent in this day and age is avoiding blue light. And, that's what's being emitted from your cell phones. So there is a blue light filter option on most modern phones, which I have mine kick on at a certain time. I think it kicks on at 10 o'clock at night. So, or if I'm going to sit there and read any kind of articles or anything on my phone, sometimes reading on the Kindle app on my phone, I will switch to the blue light filter. So it gives it that like yellowish tint to it. It filters out that blue light, and it's just better for your eyes. But that's actually been studied and found that that's actually having an effect on your ability to fall asleep. So the blue light filter is kind of an important thing too. Trying to wake up at the same time every day and go to bed at the same time is also just helping to enhance that circadian rhythm the rhythm of the circadian rhythm, just building up that internal schedule. So it's good to try that. So even on the weekends, where a lot of times you feel like, oh, I love to just sleep in on the weekend, sleeping in is actually not helping you, because it's actually throwing off your circadian rhythm. So you should be waking up at the same time on Saturday, Sunday, or your day off, just because that's the best way to operate, when it comes to trying to keep your circadian rhythm in check. Now, it also mentions not to binge sleep or sleep in late or sleep, really way into the afternoon or anything like that on the weekends, and for that reason I just mentioned. Now, it does say that you can learn how much sleep you need, because there are some people who don't need as much sleep. Now, I just saw something on Twitter, which I think was a Business Insider, maybe it was a Tech Insider, but it was one of those videos, and it was Steve Aoki, who's that electronic DJ, and I like his music, who was talking about sleep and talking about lack of sleep and how he's operating on 3 to 4 hours of sleep because he's touring most of the 365 days of the year. He's out there like 300 days a year or something like that. So he's on tour so much that he, and moving from city to city, that he doesn't really get to sleep much. And he's kind of built his body around that, but he's actually learned to do kind of like the power nap, to gain the benefits of sleeping for the brief period of time, so that your cells can regenerate and your brain can clean the toxins, and so napping is sometimes pretty powerful. And that's actually the last thing on this list, but I'll kind of skip to that one. And what's interesting is they say the biggest peaks in melatonin production actually happens between 1 p.m. and 3 p.m., which is in the middle of the day. So it's kind of funny because it says, that's when you find that a lot of people start to feel sleepy in the afternoons, and they need that second cup of coffee, after lunchtime. But, even a short nap that's only like 15 minutes can actually be better for your body than ingesting caffeine, which sometimes is hard because you end up trying to just work through that tiredness. But, if there was a way, you could take a nap. Now, you got Silicon Valley who's promoting that stuff. They have nap rooms. I think in Japan they've got, pretty much these massive warehouses full of cots where their workers can sleep. Some companies are embracing that, but it's not usually easy if you can go to your car to take a nap. I used to do that when I was working really long shifts, and I would go to my car and I'd set a timer and I'd take a 30-minute nap for my lunch break. But then it meant I didn't get to eat lunch. So then it's a stupid trade-off thing. I'm not really helping myself. But that could work to your benefit. Another thing it mentions is that you should just stop working when it comes a certain time at night, because if you think, oh, I'm just going to power through this, it's gonna not benefit you in the long run. Now, granted, this is back to the comment I made about college students, because you may have to cram for a test, or you may need to finish a term paper or whatever it is. So those are the times when you're just, you're making that sacrifice, but it should be a short-lived sacrifice. Like, you should be doing it briefly for, maybe just a couple years, like hopefully until you finish college, and then you can get into more of a schedule. And another thing it mentions is trying to eliminate the interruptions, which I don't know, that one, like, it just kind of goes back to creating your good sleep environment, which I think is hard. And lastly, learning to meditate. So like learning to meditate, I think can have more than just benefits for sleep. I think that'll help you control getting into a relaxed state. It'll help balance your body, but it's also going to help you in other ways, because learning to meditate will help you deal with stress and anxiety and, many things. So meditation, which I talked about in the last episode, is obviously something that will have some really good positive effects. So I think it's definitely worth looking at that and working that into your schedule. So moving along, I want to talk about the area of practicing in medicine or in the medical field, of how to get to a career in sleep medicine. So this is actually coming from the American Academy of Sleep Medicine, and this is just some general information which I thought was interesting, and I figured I'd help my buddy on Reddit here just to reiterate some of the stuff that he may know, but or maybe not. But I also have kind of an anecdote or some some sentences that are from somebody who actually is a doctor, who kind of gives you a day in the life of. But with anything in the medical field, you have to complete a full accredited curriculum of medical training or medical education. So that's kind of a given. You got to go to medical school. I think it's like 8 years. I don't really know, but you got to do that. So once you can knock that out of the way, it really is just like becoming a specialist, and it's and actually you have to do residency in a specialty that will help you get into the sleep medicine subspecialty, which is kind of funny. It's a subspecialty of medicine, but I think it's something you got to kind of think ahead of time, because I'm guessing, I haven't been to medical school, but I'm guessing you could gear some of your courses so that you can better prepare yourself to go down that path, because you want to study it. And from what it sounds like, the majority of sleep medicine physicians, they specialize in internal medicine, psychiatry, pediatrics, or neurology. So you probably would be heading in one of those directions anyways, probably to kind of better prepare yourself to get into the sleep medicine subspecialty. But there's other physicians that specialize in family medicine or in anesthesiology. They can also get the sleep medicine fellowship. So it looks like there's residencies and there's fellowships that you can apply to, but you have to do one or the other in order to get accredited. It's a 1-year program, which again, I don't have anything to compare against, but that sounds like not bad. I mean, it's an additional year, but it seems like you'll be working directly in that field. And, it's going to provide the clinical training and research experience in the field of sleep medicine. And, during that program, you get to learn about normal mechanisms of sleep psychology and pathophysiology of sleep disorders. And the fellows that are participating, they get to gain the competency in how to diagnose and treat sleep disorders. So that's obviously important. I think being a part of the studies or the research in any field is just going to help you gain understanding and with real life examples. So a lot of times that's, to me, seems the most important thing is getting that real life experience. You can go through your training all day, but when you get put in the field, the big question is, are you going to be able to perform under pressure or in real life scenarios? Now, this article actually had a couple interesting sleep facts that I wanted to interject here. Inject. I keep saying interject. Inject here. 25 million U.S. adults have sleep apnea. That's where they have the problem with breathing while they're sleeping. Where I believe it's you actually stop breathing in the middle of sleeping, which is kind of scary to think that your body would just be like, I'm done breathing right now. Oh, wait, no, just kidding. So that's a lot of people. And 60% of these patients have complained, 30% of patients have complained of insomnia. So, I mean, that's kind of, I guess it's the opposite of sleep, right? Like, you can't sleep, but it's a sleep disorder because it's something that, you have to see a sleep medicine specialist in order to help solve, because it could be a chemical problem, or it could be a mental problem, a mental disorder, but whatever it is, that's a lot of people. Like 30% of adults complaining of insomnia. That's kind of crazy. And the last fact, 328,000 crashes occur annually, and are caused by drowsy driving. That's kind of scary. That's not something that is technically illegal, like drinking and driving, or smoking pot and driving, or whatever, doing any kinds of drugs and driving. But it's a problem that you gotta avoid. You gotta find, you don't want to be tired. I've had it happen to me where I've felt tired and I pulled over. I once had to drive from Iowa back to Connecticut, and I was by myself, and I remember hitting the wall somewhere in Indiana, I think it was, or I don't remember, Ohio maybe? It might have been in Ohio, in the middle of nowhere, basically. Pulled off the highway, got a sandwich and a Coke, wasn't even hungry or thirsty, couldn't even really drink the Coke, kind of smacked my face around, and I was like, I don't remember what it was, but I think I ended up then, getting, like, I had a pack of, or I got a pack of Starburst or something like that, but it basically had to get a sugar bounce off of it, and it was kind of the scare of potentially crashing while falling asleep at the wheel that really woke me up, pun intended, to the fact that I could crash. So that kind of got me going again, and then I was back on the road and moving again, but that was a little scary. Now, I think that the thing would, it seems like you have to actually get in to these fellowship programs, and there's American boards of medical specialties. That's, I guess, an overarching board, and there's several subsections of that for internal medicine, family medicine, anesthesiology, psychology and neurology, pediatrics, and otolaryngology. I don't even know how to say that word. Otolaryngology. I'm just butchering the terms because I'm actually getting a little tired because I'm recording late at night. But it's all for the effect. And so those 6 different medical specialty boards are where you would really try to get in to the fellowship or residency programs. So you really start by reaching out to those different boards and applying through those 6. Now, that the paid, this American Academy of Sleep Medicine was where I found this information out. So for anybody who's interested in getting into sleep medicine and who's actively going to medical school, or maybe has already gone through medical school and passed their bar exam. I don't know what exam you your medical bar, whatever you got to pass in order to become a doctor. Maybe this is, the next step after that is looking into board certification through those different boards. So that's something to look at. But what was interesting from this article is there was this doctor who, and these two doctors had given kind of quotes to what their day in the life of are like, and they work about 8 to 9 hours a day. So it's kind of funny because you wouldn't want a doctor who's in sleep medicine who is asleep during their session with you, or looks like they're going to fall asleep. So they do work somewhat long hours. 8 to 9 hours isn't so bad, but the two people that were in here mentioned how they ended up working later at night, in the evening. They follow up on emails, or they work on the weekends for a few hours. So sometimes doctors are the worst patients, I think is the word, and maybe they don't regulate their time as best they could. But one of the things that's a great takeaway, and this can apply to any field, any career field, is that this one doctor says that he always dedicates at least 1 to 2 hours a day to read sleep studies. So I think that's really great advice to see how you can build that into whatever career you're in, to find time. Maybe it's only a half an hour, but maybe it is an hour to 2 hours, but finding time to expand your knowledge on your area of expertise, or whatever your career field is, or whatever you might be aspiring to from the current position. Being able to set aside time to do your follow-up studies, build your knowledge, I think that's really important, and I think that's a great kind of takeaway from this. So I don't know that I really got into this as much as Reddit, the subreddit person that I spoke with would have liked, but I did find a couple tidbits, and I'm presenting that to you, so I'm sure you'll give me some feedback, hopefully positive. Next, I want to talk about lucid dreaming. So, what is lucid dreaming? Very good question, listeners. Glad you asked it. It is actually a state of dreaming, or a state of sleep while you're dreaming, where you can actually realize or recognize that you're in the dream. So it's kind of interesting because it's something that can be controlled, I think is the best way to explain it. And you can control some of the elements of your nightly dreams when you're lucid dreaming. And what's kind of cool about it is, since you can kind of control the dream, is you could make up anything. You could direct your dream in whatever direction you want so that you can enjoy it better, or possibly learn something, or, as you'll see, help solve something. So what it is sometimes there's people who can actually recognize their state that they're in, so that they can then kind of immerse themselves in the dream with a bit of consciousness. And being able to kind of control that, I think, is the key to this. So you're actually trying to figure out how to control that, in other words. So, some history. The first record of lucid dreaming was by the Greek philosopher Aristotle, and in a book called On Dreams. It's called Treatise, which is always a funny word to me, but it was essentially something he wrote about dreaming and lucid dreams, and having self-awareness during a dream state. So that was kind of an interesting tidbit. Now, what actually is happening is you're you're in a state of REM. You're in the REM phase of sleeping, like I mentioned earlier, and since it's typically occurring during that, some people have reported that it spontaneously happens, and others have reported that they are able to actually train themselves to start dreaming lucidly. Now, before I get into what some of the techniques are for training yourself to lucid dream, I thought what was interesting is if you think about why this could be valuable, and one of the big ones is to help people that are having nightmares. So the techniques that some sleep medicine doctors will actually use is to get somebody to go through a sleep therapy session and get them to go into a lucid dream so that they can actually get in there and address a particular nightmare they're having, and almost walk them through, like controlling them, kind of like in the movie Inception, to go through a series of therapeutic steps, essentially, to try to help them figure out why they're having the nightmare, or confront whatever's in the nightmare that they're having, so that they could help break that. So it has a medical purpose, or a scientific purpose, that it can help people who have maybe night terrors or something like that. Now, if you want to lucid dream yourselves, there's 3 techniques that are suggested. And I say it in this kind of, tongue-in-cheek kind of tone, just because I don't know, I haven't actually tried this, and I've heard mixed responses from people who've said they've tried it and, read up on it before. There was supposedly a machine that you could actually purchase that I remember one of my friends growing up wanted to spend money on, because I think it was a lot of money, but he's like, don't you know what this could mean? And then I remember hearing stuff about people who get trapped in their lucid dreams or something like that, or who get reality and their dreams mixed up to the point where they really can't tell. And it's almost like that movie Inception, which is obviously a great example. If you haven't seen Inception, you can go watch it, and it's essentially taking lucid dreaming to a whole nother crazy level, and creating a lot of suspense and adding in some DiCaprio in it, and having some plot that's built around being able to manipulate people in order to accomplish something. But there's lucid dreaming in it, so it's a good movie. Actually, it's a fantastic movie, and Joseph Gordon-Levitt is in it, and he's great, and you should watch it. But now, if you want to try this yourself, here's what is first suggested. And the first thing they suggest is what they call testing reality, or verifying that you're in reality. And it says this technique relies on intention. In real life, the wall will remain solid, as they give an example, and impenetrable, while in a dream, your hand will pass through it with ease, right? It's a reality check that is what you're trying to do. Now, they said, you're trying to, I guess, prove reality, the difference between reality and dreaming. Now, this might be more of a safety measure, so you don't get trapped in that state where you can't tell what's what. But it's a method of training your brain to help you figure out when you're in a dream, and then from that point you can start taking control. Another reality check they say is to reread a line of text. So if you reread the line of text in reality, the text doesn't change. It'll stay the same, but in a dream, the text will constantly shift. So that could be a way for you to help train in the reality testing phase. Now, these might be all 3, these common techniques, like they don't specifically say to do these independently and not try the other ones. It could be that you're building on each one and getting, better at this. But the other technique they mention is this waking back to bed, in quotes. And it actually, and I've read this one specifically before, that says that you're setting an alarm in the middle of the night, and essentially you're waking yourself up so that you can stay awake for a brief period of time, but long enough so that you can fall back to sleep and get back into REM sleep. So, the goal there is really trying to leverage the fact that you're in REM sleep, and it'll put you right back into REM, which is the dream state. So you might be able to have more consciousness when you go back into it when you've been dreaming, and then you come back to, and you fall back into REM sleep. Now, the other one, and I've also heard of this one, was what they call mnemonic induction. And it involves you repeating to yourself that you want to do this. Like, you say, tonight I will notice that I'm dreaming. Tonight I notice that I'm dreaming. Tonight I'll notice that I'm dreaming. And you say it over and over. And, you're trying to program yourself to achieve in dream lucidity. Now, this article doesn't actually say this, but I read about that one, is that you need to do this before you fall asleep while you're going into falling asleep. So you're actually trying to leverage it as the last thing that you kind of remember, as you're going into sleep land, drifting off to sleep. So I think probably that's all I got to say about sleep, because I am actually getting sleepy, and the sound of my voice is making me feel sleepy too. And hopefully you're not listening to this at night. And actually, hopefully you're not listening to this while you're driving and you're getting lulled to sleep, and then you're going to be a drowsy driver and one of the 320-something thousand people who crash. Please don't do that. And whatever you do, please don't mention you were listening to this podcast while you crashed your car. That is from me telling you that would be really bad. So please don't do it. Thanks. All right. This was all about sleep, and hopefully you gained some knowledge from it, because this was a long episode. So long that I'm not going to include one of my stories that I usually include, because I had some stories mixed in here and there. So that being said, I'm going to be signing off, and I want to thank you again for listening to Finding Your Identity. This was the episode on sleep, and I hope you enjoyed. And right before I go to sleep, I needed to go check on my captives that are the non-listeners, the NLs, as they've been being dubbed by my security force. And I'll make sure that they are getting sleep, because they've got really expensive Sleep Number mattresses now because they unionized. Ugh. Anyways, until next time, have a good night. Have a good rest. Have a good whatever nap. And I'll see you again in the future. And YouTube, good night.